Hello again. This is another video for the Pixel Dailies theme. This time it was Shrine, and I decided to do a Japanese Shinto Shrine. Now, obviously, it's a lot more comfortable for me to do this because I'm fairly comfortable with drawing. But as you can see, I'm basically sketching everything out in pixels at the real size that the image is going to have. And because this is a symmetrical design, it's a lot faster. You just do one half and then you flip things over. Now I've already sketched out a bit of a background. I want some really tall, thick trees, and I want that sort of maple tree on the right there just to break the symmetry because it's becoming very repetitive. And I apply the color in just one layer. Now this is a mistake because when you have so many layered elements, like you have a background and then you have a sky and you have levels of fog or levels of density on the atmosphere, you really don't want to keep things in one layer because that's going to become problematic. So I start by defining the shrine really well, or as best as I can, considering the amount of colors I want to spend and the amount of time I want to spend on this, which was about an hour and 10 minutes. I really can't afford to put in too much detail or use too many colors, but I also can't afford to leave this undefined, so that when people look at this, they read what it is. They know that it's that it's specifically a model of a building, and I can't just go and do a silhouette. So I have to add colors. I have to add enough detail for this to look like what it's meant to look like. In this case, a shrine. So as you can see, I'm putting in a lot of detail here, trying to mimic some of the architectural elements that I'm looking at in a photo. The photo that I have wasn't perfectly from the front view, so I had to do a little bit of guesswork, or at least some calculation. But what I did use was the lighting it had. And it had a very simple top lighting, which I have here, and I have it in blue on the roof because I feel that that's what would be more natural, to have the blue of the sky shining down on the shrine. I don't see any natural light directly hitting this because of the trees. They would cover that up, but I see a lot of possible ambient light, just the sky color soaking down through the leaves and illuminating this. Now I'm also going with slight bluish tint and greenish tint for the stone because one, the stone will be covered in moss, and two, maybe it's well, not so much granite, but maybe it will be like one of those bluish stones that you see very often, so I can get away with reusing some of these colors. Now to fill up the space in between the shrines and the trees, I put in these lamps covered by this tiny little roof. And what I'm doing now is building the basic shape for that fence, the stone fence, but I'm doing it with a lasso tool so that at least it gets well sketched out. The ones that I had initially were basically rough sketches. And what I'm doing is I'm gradually substituting everything. Now for the rock here, I use the process of creating a lasso selection and then filling in with another shade. And I'm doing that to get the top of the rock to look like it's mossy, and as well adding then shadows on the rock to create different surfaces of the rock. I'm not 100% happy with the result. It's clearly rushed. I'm not looking into putting these colors here with any sort of logic. I'm just really filling in, trying to get a texture to going. And then I do the same here with the stone fences, where I come in and break the edges and add a little bit of cracks and a little bit of erosion on the edges to get more of a rock look. And at least it gives it a little more character and more interesting, since they are, in fact, quite big on the screen. Now, what I had to do here was to create a selection with a lot of the elements from the background so that I was able to separate the shrine from the background. Now, this allows me to work in layers, I mean. So now I have several layers for the tree trunks. And right now I start using my pixel brush with size. And this allows me to quickly sketch a texture and some of those branches there. I mean, it would be considered a little bit of cheating if I'm being honest with you, that you're sketching a bunch of pixels all together, so you're not really taking the care of putting in each pixel individually. But it does save time, and the technique is still not relevant when you're looking to show shading more exactly than really filling in spaces with color. The same thing happens here with a brush I'm using with the bushes. I'm using a leaf brush that I made previously for another project that I had to deliver quite fast. Those leaves in the foreground, they're very bright. I mean, the bright ones are very bright, and they're really taking away from the shrine. You're kind of looking at the shrine like it's a secondary element because the light on the colors is so strong. And eventually I cover them up. So I'm just adding some greens here for the trees, and I'm adding these tree trunks in the distance as a way to remind people that those are just tree shapes, but the colors are so close to each other that there's no not enough contrast to show the rest of the tree. Now this is where I start building in the maple or the maple tree, and I do a background layer with the background color, with the shadow color that I want, which is in this case this green, and then I duplicate it to the front of the tree, and I erase part of it so that I can see the tree trunks behind it. And then I basically shade the bright parts of the leaves, the parts of the leaves that are facing up, and on the back layer I shade with a warm color the sides of the tree, of the leaves that are getting hit by light, but we're seeing them from underneath, so we get that subsurface scattering, and it kind of looks like the tree is glowing from the bottom. On the stones here, I start with a really strong shade. I add these bright edges there to give it a sort of a worn look. But what I do afterwards is just figure out a shade that looks more to me like an old stone, and I translate that into simple steps at the end of that sort of sidewalk or passage, stone passage. I also added those pillars on the temple to make it look a little wider, and this is the complete image. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys took something with you from this, and I'll see you guys. Take care.